begin with a sentence from Genesis. No, God knows well that the moment you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you shall be like gods. Now this talk is on divine mercy, and to think about mercy, you have to presuppose that there's some kind of evil to be merciful towards. So I think the story begins right here in Genesis. The temptation to be like gods. Now, before we drew this picture of the Blessed Trinity, this total self-giving of one person to the other, and one losing himself in the other, so that there is this total reality of love. And that love is so, in the second person, is so bursting that he has to go beyond himself, to proceed from himself, to reveal this goodness and this love, to share this goodness and love. So therefore he has to create. You might say he's impulsed to create so that he can reveal this goodness and love. And so he does create, and all things come into being through him. And at the center of this creation evolves this creature who is made to the image and likeness of God. And this creature now is able to receive, because he has a evolved mind to the point where he can receive this revelation of the goodness and love of God. And so it happens, and this creature comes into being through him and for him to eventually come into this time and space in the fullness of time, and to reveal the goodness and love of God, and to be within, to live, to make his abode, to make this a place for the Blessed Trinity to live and to be. Now, this happened in this paradise. In the great evolution, there is a place called paradise, where the man lives, and he's told not to eat of the fruit of a certain tree. He's given a command, and it comes into his mind that why should I obey this command? Why should you obey this command? Because you are the image and likeness of God. So therefore, why do you have to obey? Why do you have to... you are as God. I have intellect and will and freedom. You are like God. You are made to the image and likeness of God. And it comes into the man's idea that he wants freedom from this God, so that he does not have to obey, so that he himself is like God. And being like God, he has total command over all things. He has freedom. He has independence. He controls. He wants to control like God. And you might say that once this idea comes into his mind that he wants freedom from God, God says to him, "Depart from me. No longer can you be in my presence. You have to leave the divine presence, because you have chosen independence. You have chosen freedom. You have chosen to make yourself like God, rather than to accept my image that I imprint upon you. Now, it's very, very interesting that this coming of evil into this creation really, really resembles the story of the prodigal son. Now, let's look at this prodigal son. Let's give him a name. Let's call him Adam. And let's call his brother Steve. So Adam and Steve are in this paradisal estate of his father's. He has everything in this estate. But he wants independence. He wants freedom. He wants control of his own paradise. So he tells his father, Father, give me my inheritance, because I no longer want to live here with you. I want independence. And by giving me my inheritance, that will give me my independence. So I can leave you and leave this paradisal estate that you have made. So Adam goes off, and he goes into the land where he can have a happy time, and he can squander his inheritance, and he can have freedom, independence, control. He can have everything that he wanted, plus his inheritance. Well, tough times come, and he loses his inheritance. He squanders it all, and now he no longer has his inheritance. He has nothing but misery, because hard times have come. And you might say that this Adam, this second Adam that Jesus tells us about, thinks that it's better for him to return to his father's estate. But how can he possibly go back? I'll do anything to go back. I'll even take care of the swine, and I can just survive on the leftovers from the swine's meals in this paradise of my father's. So he heads home, and his father, having a premonition of what is going to happen, goes to the highest spot in his estate, where he can see if this son of his is coming back. And he sees him, and he runs to him and puts his cloak around him and gives him a ring and invites him to come back into paradise. And he rejoices over the arrival of his son back in his estate, back where he was before he squandered all, and before he brought, you might say, disgrace to his family. And now that he is back, the father gives him a party, but the older brother, Steve, becomes jealous. And just like the first Cain and Abel, Steve is ready to kill his brother. He would rather have his brother dead than to have him enjoying this estate after having squandered his own inheritance, and having disgraced his father, and having him done all that is evil, that is contrary to the wishes of the father. Just think of all the evils that are contained in that one act of disobedience. There's pride, there's desire for control, desire uh, to just take everything into oneself. And I suppose the ultimate name for it is narcissism. Well, anyway, this brother is so furious. I mean, I say he wouldn't mind killing his brother. But the father comes up to him and has a very pleading conversation with the older brother, with Steve, and tells him that, this is my son. He's your brother, and I love him. And even though he did all these evil things, I never stopped loving my son. And my son is bigger. And my love for my son, not my son, but my love for my son is bigger than all the evil he has done, than all the evil that can possibly be done. My love is bigger than that, than the evil. My love for my son can never change, will always be the same, even though he has offended me, even though he has disgraced me, even though he has really tried to be me, to be the father instead of being the son. So this reality of this love that is bigger than all the evil that the son could possibly commit. The name of this love, it is a new name. It is mercy. And I believe that is the origin of the mercy of God is really our evil, our desire for independence, our desire to be in control, our desire to be God. His love for us is bigger than this. And you can say that I think that this tremendous love that the second person of the Blessed Trinity experienced within the Trinity and wanted to go to creation and reveal the goodness and love of God. The love that Jesus had and has, once he turned from the inner sanctum of the Trinity and headed toward and directed that love toward us, the name of that love is mercy. And I think that certainly this is a concept that is in Pope Francis' bull of indiction for the year of mercy. He contains all these thoughts that I have given you this morning. He in this statement of the Pope, he talks about the love of God being being bigger and greater and all-embracing, far beyond all the evil in the world. That this love that God has for us formed into mercy because we have inherited from Adam, from the very beginnings of this reality of creation, there is this desire for independence, the desire for control. All that you and I experience in our own being all of that is contained in one evil. You have a little bit of evil, well, you get the whole thing. You don't have just a touch of pregnancy, you have the whole thing. So when you choose evil, as Adam did, and separated yourself from God, you've taken on the whole of evil. And in each one of us, there is that kernel of all evil. We certainly know that if we had a chance, we would do all the evil in the world. It's only because of circumstances and God's protection that we don't commit all the evil that is in the world. It's all there in, you might say, in potency, in our genes, in our being. We have inherited it. We call it, we've inherited original sin. We've inherited that original condition of mankind. And God, in his goodness, sometimes preserves us. Now, if you take mercy of God and say that that is his entire love for the whole of humanity, within that love, there is the reality, in fact, you can call that love grace. God's giving his self-communication to us. The theologians call that grace. Now, St. Thomas distinguishes between prevenient grace and sanctifying grace and actual grace. Now, prevenient grace is the grace that goes before me and prevents me from doing some kind of evil. And the one person that he prevented with prevenient grace was our Blessed Mother. She was completely freed from, by this prevenient grace, from ever experiencing this evil that is the original evil. She was, it was through prevenient grace. Now, through the good son, through Steve, he also received prevenient grace. He received the grace of being constant with his father, of stability with his father, of staying there when his brother went off. And he certainly must have said to himself, gee, I would have liked to have done that too. I'd like to go off. But instead, by God's prevenient grace, he didn't. And it is this prevenient grace that goes before us that has prevented us from not getting into all the evil that we are capable of. And the theologians say that that man cannot do good without this merciful love of God intervening and stopping us from doing evil. Every single time that you and I do a good act, it's because Jesus in us prevents us from doing evil acts, because we would do evil acts, but then he moves us to do good acts. It is himself that does the good act within us. And then so Adam, was he responsible for desiring to do the evil that he did? God could have prevented it. God could have given him a prevenient grace, a grace that he gave the Blessed Mother, a grace that he gave the good son, the one who was faithful. Adam could have been given that grace, but in the plan of divine providence, there would not have been this reality of mercy. This reality that is certainly not within the Blessed Trinity. There's no need for mercy. Mercy can only come into being if there is something to be merciful to, a sinful creature. So in the great divine plan, there was this reality that this creature who is made to the image of God can desire to be free from God, can have this kernel of evil. And because of that, we have this reality of divine mercy. Now, it certainly is a difficult concept to get our head into. It is it seems so unfair. It seems so, but it's happened several times in Scripture. The Scripture says that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he hardened the heart of Judas. The evil spirit came into Judas, and God could have prevented that from happening. And we do not know, and we cannot know why that has to be. It seems to our thinking it's not fair, but it is part of the bigger divine plan. And so this reality of God's love for us, which is far greater than any kind of evil, even though it seems unfair and not, you might say, evenly spread out over all mankind. Let's face it, there are saints like little Therese today. Today's the feast of Saint Therese of Lisieux. God, through prevenient grace, helped that little girl come into this world, and in 25 years, he gave her a way of the cross. She was filled with all kinds of suffering, and there were times when she said, "I did not know it was possible to suffer so much." She suffered greatly, and it was part of the divine plan. This 25-year-old girl never did anything really wrong. She is the typical, I would say, the typical nun, religious, who is innocent from birth and goes through life just doing good, carrying within themselves human frailty, human weakness, and as some people say, hearing the confession of nuns is like being pelted with popcorn. What can the poor nuns do that is evil, you know? They're just sweet women who have human frailty. But God has through his prevenient grace, has preserved them from the exposure to what the world considers as evil. And, you know, it's a tremendous grace that God gives, but somebody else in the family feels jealous. God didn't preserve, the first Adam and the Adam in our story of the prodigal son. God let that son go off and lead a desolate life, part of a divine plan, so that the Father could manifest his tremendous love for this boy who is his son, the reality of boundless love for the Son. The divine mercy is absolutely boundless, and somehow in the great plan of God, God is glorified having this great love for his Son. To hear a person say, I love my son, that is a beautiful, beautiful statement for someone to come from. Well, as the Pope says in this paper that I gave you, it's visceral. God's love for his Son is visceral. It's from the very bowels of his being. He loves that Son, and that is so beautifully manifest in the human love that a father has for his Son. And so the Father is, you might say, manifests his great goodness by having such love for this Son that spent his fortune and wasted it. That means nothing to the Father in comparison to his love for his Son. And I think that is the origin, the beginning, the origin, the source of divine mercy. It is this tremendous love that God has for us, and it's bigger than all of us. It's bigger than any sin in the world. It's bigger than creation, because it is divine. And when we think that we can make ourselves divine by our own will, just because God has made us to his image and likeness, we have to go a very, very narrow route. We are the image of God. We have freedom. We have all these gifts that God gives us, and we have this ability to turn away from him. We have freedom, and it's so you might say, so risky to try to let God make us into saints and trying to do it by ourselves. It's Pelagianism. In some way we can bring ourselves to salvation. No, I think that's